Hawaii Representative Tulsi Gabbard is under fire from fellow Democrats after introducing legislation that critics claim would exclude trans people from high school and college sports. The so-called Protect Women's Sports Act would block schools from federal funding if they allowed transgender students to play on girls' teams by specifically tying Title IX protections for female athletes to biological sex. Gabbard explained her proposed legislation, tweeting, "Title IX was created out of a recognition of a biological distinction between men and women, and the need to make sure women and girls have equal opportunities to compete on a level playing field in sports. My bill upholds the original intent of Title IX and strengthens it. That is all." Here to help us take a closer look at this is Tiana Lowe, commentary writer for the Washington Examiner and a contributor here at the First TV. Tiana, good to see you.
Hi, Buck.
So what would this, before we get into the backlash against Tulsi and all the back and forth, what would this bill do?
So practically speaking, it would just explicate that Title IX, which again ties direct federal funding of universities to a number of provisions, would just ensure that universities must be compliant with making sure that biological women have access to their own sports divisions. And this is the exact same way that it works with every other provision. Under, I believe it's Title VII, you cannot racially discriminate against students in your hiring or grading processes. Under Title IX now, we've extrapolated it out to also include sexual harassment, sexual assault, where those cases must be litigated in the university to ensure that students who are harassed or assaulted have an equal access to an education. But the original provision of Title IX is just for sport. So it is just saying that if you are a biological female and if you are on the women's wrestling team or if you're on the women's track and field team, you're not competing against people who have the, statistically speaking, a general advantage over biological women, which is men with testosterone.
Yeah, and Tulsi Gabbard has gotten a lot of criticism. Here she is, the Congresswoman, responding to people on her own side. I mean, it's Democrats that are coming after her. Here's what she says. Play it.
Now, let's be honest. There are some people who oppose my bill, the Protect Women's Sports Act, holding Title IX because they don't like Title IX in the first place. And they don't like Title IX because it is based on that recognition of the biological distinction between men and women. But it is a scientifically established fact that there is such a thing as a man and a woman. It's also common sense. So it is the height of hypocrisy for those who claim to be advocates for women's rights to deny that there is even such a thing as a woman, biologically speaking.
She raises some very interesting points. I mean, I would start with, it seems, Tiana, that even the definition of a woman under the law as seen in something like Title IX would be at question at some level here. I mean, I would wonder, how would the critics of Tulsi Gabbard on the left define being a woman for the purposes of sports?
I mean, as a member of our armed services, Congresswoman Gabbard understands, better than most the distinct differences. When as she is advancing her own military career, it's not as though women are held to the same standards as men, because that would be insane to expect a woman to do as many push-ups, to expect a woman to be able to bench as much. With regards to sports in particular, people do ignore that this was the original purpose of the bill, of this provision of the Educational Rights Act. And if I may just make a brief aside about Congresswoman Gabbard, she gets called a trans exclusionary radical feminist. But it should not be radical to acknowledge that women and men are different. In the same provisions that basically give women a, I don't want to use the term upper hand, but in these Title IX sexual assault cases, we recognize that a man has a physical advantage over most women in general. And that if a woman says that a man overpowers her, and if that is what's ensuring, a verdict in her favor in these cases, that's not a bad thing. But, the same radical left-wing feminists who are willing to say oh, you're going to believe someone like a Christine Blasey Ford just by basis of her saying that she was overpowered, whatever. That logic doesn't extend to women's sports. That doesn't extend to soccer, to volleyball, to lacrosse, to all of these things that could be a clear and present danger to women if they are competing against biological men.
So it's now the Democrat position, based on the criticism that we're seeing against Tulsi Gabbard, as well as, I think, more broadly shared throughout the media. It's the Democrat position that a biological 200-pound, 6-foot-tall male, for example, who identifies as female should be able to compete with women in strength and speed sports and be treated entirely as a woman. Just so we're all clear, that is now pretty close to Democrat Party dogma. Is that right?
Yes, it is. And at hand, at its core, it is a financial issue in the sense that men got more scholarship on the basis of athletics before Title IX was passed. And that's obviously not fair because the taxpayers favor men over women. And so when Title IX was passed, it ensured that more women who would not have otherwise been able to afford higher education had access to this scholarship on the basis of their own athletic merit. Now they want to remove that, but look, we're seeing this across the board. They want to divorce the taxpayer will from the taxpayer dollar. In the same way that you and I are currently paying for public education that is not being delivered to our students in an equitable way, they want to divorce the entire notion of federal funding from any will of the people. They want these universities to be able to host the Chinese Communist Party's Confucius Institutes. They want to be able to radically slash STEM budgets that way they can focus all of their energy on left-wing propagandizing. And now they want to use our money to basically favor biological men, trans women. No one has a problem with identifying them as such, except when it comes to making it so then women don't have equal access to funding, putting women at physical danger in these sports competitions.
Seems like a problem the Democrats are going to have to continue to fight amongst themselves about, as well as everybody else. If they can't define easily what a woman is, I think we've already established what the problem is. Tiana, always good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Buck.
Hey, Team Buck, just want to say thanks so much for watching The First on YouTube. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more great content from The First, please click that subscribe button.